In this video, we're talking about what a fractional executive pipeline actually consists of. And this is an important conversation because most fractional executives believe they have a pipeline when what they really have is a collection of disconnected conversations. First, I'm going to explain why pipeline is so commonly misunderstood in fractional work. Then I'm going to walk you through the core components that actually create predictability, not just visibility, not just activity, but real predictability. I'll also share an example of how a highly experienced fractional executive can look busy, credible, and in demand and still have no real pipeline at all. And finally, I'll explain the most common mistake fractional executives make when they confuse effort with structure. Let's dive in. When most people hear the word pipeline, their mind immediately goes to leads, more conversations, more outreach, more activity. But a fractional executive pipeline is not a list of people, and it's not a calendar full of calls. A real pipeline is a designed system. It's something that reliably produces qualified conversations with the right type of client over time without you having to reinvent the process every month. If conversations only happen when you're actively pushing, following up, or reminding people that you exist, then what you have isn't a pipeline. What you have is a dependency on your own effort. And dependency is the opposite of predictability. One of the biggest misunderstandings I see is this idea that pipeline equates to activity. If I'm posting on LinkedIn, if I'm responding to messages, if I'm commenting, emailing, taking calls, then surely I must have a pipeline. But activity is not a system. A system has cause and effect built right into it. A system answers very specific questions. Questions like, if I do this today, what happens next week? What happens next month? Where does the next conversation actually come from? Most fractional executives can't answer those questions clearly. They know what they're doing, but they don't know why it works or when it works. And they don't know why it suddenly stops. A real pipeline has inputs, outputs, and a sequence in between. If you remove yourself from the equation and everything stops, then there's no system. Senior executives struggle with this because they're used to operating inside systems. They haven't had to design one for themselves before. But a pipeline only exists when the demand curve continues, even while you're focused on delivery. If your pipeline disappears the moment you stop doing tasks, then it never was a pipeline to begin with. Every functioning pipeline starts with entry points. These are the places where people can first encounter you. And this is where fractional pipelines most often break. Because most often, entry points are accidental. A referral shows up, a former colleague reaches out, someone stumbles across your profile. And that feels good. It feels validating, but it's not controllable. When entry points are accidental, pipeline becomes unpredictable by definition. An intentional pipeline is different. It means you can clearly name where conversations originate. You understand the context someone is in when they first encounter your thinking. You know what problem they're already having at that moment. And you understand why that exposure will logically then lead to a conversation. Because without intentional entry points, everything downstream becomes reactive. You start chasing conversations instead of shaping them. And control over entry points is what will allow you to design the rest of your pipeline with confidence. This is one of the hardest adjustments for senior executives. Not every person who is interested should become a conversation. In corporate roles, interest often equals priority. In fractional work, interest is cheap. Intent is not. A real pipeline does the work before the call even happens. It filters curiosity from commitment, and it prevents you from spending time explaining yourself to people who were never serious in the first place. It protects your positioning by ensuring conversations start at the right altitude. If every call feels like a maybe, if you're constantly explaining what you do, if conversations feel draining instead of energizing, that's not a sales problem. That's a filtering problem. A healthy pipeline allows you to show up calm, clear, and selective. Here's one of the simplest tests of whether a pipeline actually exists. If you stopped all activity for 30 days, would meaningful conversations still happen? If the answer is no, then momentum doesn't exist. Many fractional executives experience short bursts of activity, 2 or 3 weeks of calls, a busy calendar, and everything feels great. And then it goes quiet. That pattern feels unpredictable because it is. A real pipeline creates momentum, Past effort continues to create future conversations. Your visibility compounds, your credibility carries forward. Momentum smooths spikes into flow. And flow is what allows fractional executives to feel calm instead of constantly starting over. Most people think predictability comes from more leads. It doesn't. Predictability comes from understanding where conversations come from, understanding which actions actually matter, and understanding what can be adjusted without panic. A smaller pipeline that you understand is more valuable than a larger one you don't. Volume without control creates anxiety, not confidence. Predictability allows you to plan delivery. It allows you to plan income. It allows you to plan capacity. Control is what creates security, not busyness. Until you have control, adding volume only amplifies uncertainty. And I see this pattern all the time. A senior executive looks busy, their calendar is full, conversations are happening. For a few weeks, everything feels solid, and then it stops. That's not a pipeline. That's a spike. And spikes are accidental. Pipelines are designed. Pipelines flow. Spikes disappear. And flow only exists when structure exists. So when we talk about what a fractional executive pipeline actually consists of, we're not talking about tactics. We're talking about systems instead of tasks, intentional entry instead of luck, filtering instead of chasing, momentum instead of spikes, and control instead of anxiety. Without those components, what looks like a pipeline is really just effort with a good story attached to it. Now that you understand what a fractional executive pipeline actually consists of, if you want to see how this all fits together, go watch this video next, the system behind predictable pipeline for fractional executives. In that video, you'll see how these components connect into a single cohesive structure instead of existing as disconnected ideas. Go watch that video next.